Welcome to another episode of our personal empowerment audio programs, Finding Yourself in Paradise. Hi, I'm Michael Benner.
And I'm Steve Snyder, and our program today is entitled Wisdom, and all its many aspects and facets. I think I'd like to start with a Confucius quote about attaining wisdom. He said there's three ways to attain wisdom. You can do it through reflection, which is the noblest. You can do it through imitation, which is the easiest, or you can do it through experience, which is the bitterest.
It occurs to me, if we're going to do a show on wisdom, then I'm going to cop out right up front and say I'm not sure what it is, because if I said what it was, well, that wouldn't be a very wise thing to do, I don't think.
Indeed, Gandhi said, it's wise to not trust your own wisdom that much,
I think so. I think that's a pretty good idea. First thing I think of is the wisdom of experience. I guess that's the first thing that comes to me. And I think of my own life and the mistakes that I believe I will not have to make again, because I'll see this thing coming way down the road. A mile away, I'm going to say, uh-oh, I remember this trap, whatever it was, in relationship or at work or whatever. You live and learn, as a friend of mine used to say. And so that's the first thing. And I think we can talk about wisdom on a number of different levels as not only a body of knowledge, of smart rules or axioms, but there's an esoteric meaning of wisdom too, where we tend to capitalize the W, actually. The Ageless Wisdom is the name of our sister site, so we'll talk a little about that too. But that's where I would begin the discussion, just to suggest that this is one of the benefits of maturing and getting a little older, is all the mistakes you're not going to have to make again.
If, in fact, you do live and learn. There are people who live and repeat the mistakes over and over and over again. I don't think age brings wisdom. It has the potential to, that some people do mature and become wiser as they age, but there are many people who don't. I don't think it's an automatic, connected to getting older. But the likelihood of someone who is very young to have great wisdom is much smaller. I mean, it's happened. There have been really wise children through the history and course of the world. But generally speaking, there is a correlation between experience and wisdom, and experience that you don't repeat. I mean, experience that you actually assimilate, understand, learn from, and learn to do something different the next time.
You talk about kids not having wisdom yet, and yet we do have that phrase, out of the mouths of babes. Sometimes there's a really profound wisdom that comes through a little kid unconsciously. I think the Being There, the Peter Sellers movie, where he plays this Chauncey Gardner character who likes to watch, again, he's perceived as being wise, and yet as the viewer of the film, you're sort of on the inside and realize he's a very simple, childlike character, but you see the way he's admired, and the wisdom is recognized there for its simplicity. Nonetheless, it's wisdom. And so he does wonderful things, advising presidents and going all over the world, when really he's emotionally and maybe intellectually about 6 years old. So there's something about that. In fact, I think it was Lao Tzu that makes reference to knowledge being that which you add to, and yet to get to wisdom you take away from. There's something about it. It really needs to be seen simply to be seen clearly. And wisdom is what remains when you break away the majority of the nonsense, the noise and the chatter around a concept, and get right down to the real core, and it feels so solid, That's what we're looking for in wisdom.
Yeah, and it's not like the more knowledge, the wiser you become. Filling your mind with more and more knowledge doesn't have any necessary connection to getting wiser. And becoming smarter, more intelligent, brighter also doesn't necessarily necessitate wisdom. I mean, it's really smart to figure out how to make an atomic bomb. It may not be wise to figure out, or really smart to figure out how to take fossils and make it into fuel, but it might have been the most wisest thing that we've ever done. So smart and wise don't have necessary correlation either. I think it's important to try and define wisdom by saying what it isn't, and it isn't knowledge, and it isn't intelligence, it isn't cleverness, it isn't insight. It's an experience where we mature enough to understand. I think Buddha said something like, being willing to do unpleasant things for good results and be unwilling to do pleasant things that cause bad results. So there's some kind of a discernment that comes in understanding the cause-effect that I think is part of wisdom.
I really think one of the primary aspects of wisdom is just to be aware of the understanding that you are a growing, continually, perpetually evolving creature. Not only in terms of your physical body, like Darwin's evolution of the species, but to grow not only more mature, but more intelligent and more wise, and that this happens naturally, but that we can accelerate that process. Why is it that so many people are interested in ending their education and refusing to see learning as a lifestyle, when others go, man, I want to just use every day of my life to learn as much as I can because it's just so fascinating, the world around me, and then myself, to learn about myself, to develop myself, to better understand my relationship to the world around me. What a rich and wonderful thing. I think it's odd. I don't have the numbers. I've never seen the research, but my sense of it is we're talking about a majority of people that just think of themselves as living a rather static life. They're acquiring experience maybe and new information, but they're not thinking of themselves as growing intellectually or as you say, beyond the intellect, beyond intelligence and knowledge, to grow your awareness, to grow your consciousness. That's wisdom.
Yeah, I wonder how many people would answer the question, do you expect to be wiser at the end of this year than you are now, with a yes or a no answer? I'd be curious what most people think. I don't think most people think that wiser is going to necessarily happen to me, like that I may never get to be wise. Wise is just some special people that get to be wise people. It's like there's geniuses, and most people don't get to be geniuses. And some people think wise people, most people don't get. I don't know. I think there's some wisdom in all of us, but what occurs to me is that the wisdom comes from the non-egoic part of ourselves. That is, the part of ourselves that is ego-based, that is afraid, worried about control and judgment and approval and stuff like that. That part is so emotionally based that fear gets triggered and logic goes away. And I think you can safely say that when logic goes away, you lose a sense of wisdom. Wisdom has to have within it some kind of a logic, some kind of it makes sense, common sense, I think. So when the ego takes over and it gets afraid of things that aren't even dangerous, aren't even the slightest bit dangerous, you lose wisdom, you lose perspective. So I think maybe one thing we can say about wisdom is that it comes from the part of you that is centered, the part of you that feels safe, the part of you that can step back and see the bigger picture, the part we call higher consciousness or higher self.
Let me take that a little further. To be aware of wisdom, I think, to even look for it or search for it, suggests a sense that the world is organized, that the universe, our whole existence, has some sort of integrity or reliability to it that we can discern.
And that doesn't mean like preordained or predestined or it's got to happen a certain way. It means there is a coherence to the universe.
Unified.
Yeah.
Verse.
Yeah. Right.
Somehow one thing. I think religious people have this one God idea down. They argue about its name and whose God is better than who else's God. There seems to be a resistance among many religious people to the idea that there's just one God by any name.
I remember a kid saying, I know God's name, and the teacher said, what? And he said, Howard. She goes, Howard? Yeah, Howard be thy name. I hear it all the time.
Yeah, well, in any event, this monotheistic religious idea that we find in Judeo-Christian and Muslim religions, and even to some extent in Eastern and Middle Eastern philosophies, some very ancient philosophies, has God as being separated. One God, but separated from its creation, living in a form. Sometimes religious people will say, well, God is everywhere, but they still have this picture of him as a man. We make God in our image, which is the blasphemy of it. The idea that what religious people call God could be a force, a degree or a level of consciousness, and that this is where wisdom is found. This is where we tend to approach the esoteric meaning of wisdom. Again, beyond body of knowledge, it's really the wisdom of the heart. in esoteric philosophy. Wisdom is thought of as the love, the peace of mind that someone who aspires to be God-like, to find their best nature, that is said to bring about what you and I call paradise, again, a peace of mind, a level of awareness where we see the bigger picture, and we see the connections where most people only see separation. That's one way of approaching wisdom as a philosophy, or the esoteric meaning is a path to the one, from the many to the one, a path, a way of seeing the bigger picture and then creating not a set of rules, but just sort of some rough guidelines that acknowledge the fact that, hey, keep in mind, although we appear to all be separated, there's really one thing at work in this one verse, this universe.
And with that philosophy, as we stay in that kind of consciousness, out of fear, living in love, then we have the opportunity to see things in that unique paradise kind of way. And we get the ability to step back and experience our wisdom. It's not as if we experience much wisdom when we're feeling endangered, when we're feeling frenetic and stressed out. We don't experience wisdom in those moments. We move into a black or white, right or wrong, either or mentality, and we knee-jerk react. Wisdom comes when we can explore all the different possibilities, and that's one of the things wisdom is not knee-jerking. It's exploring all the possibilities. What was it, Thoreau said something about one of the earmarks of wisdom is that you don't do desperate things, and it would take being out of stress, being out of fear, and knowing that, I've got that extra moment to explore other options here. I have choices. I have more choices that are even there apparent at the moment. That's, I think, one of the key bottom lines of wisdom.
To take your time.
Yeah, and it means you can go fast but not hurry, as John Wooden said.
Yeah, you mentioned that the other day. And the idea that I don't have the time is not very wise. It's sort of, what's that saying, penny wise and pound foolish.
Or a stitch in time saves nine.
There you go. As we take the time to carefully consider the consequences of our speech and other behaviors, even the consequences of our attitudes and our belief systems, there's always a payoff. Well, I won't say there's always a payoff. There's often a payoff that makes that so worthwhile that I think part of the maturing process, whether people think they're getting better or staying the same, part of that ripening, maturing process is, well, now hold on. Let's just take a breath and relax a minute before we all rush off and do something we're going to regret later. I think that's evidence of wisdom.
Yeah, I think another name for wisdom could be common sense, but I think there's nothing common about common sense, and I don't know that we all define common sense in the same way. But I think what is truly wise is that which has maintained its integrity through the ages. That is, those things that were believed by the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans, and then later by the Aztecs, and then later by the Native Americans, and today by the local Hawaiians. I mean, the things that, those philosophies that have stood the test of time, that have been the ageless wisdom, I think that's one of the earmarks, one of the ways you can say, this is wise because it's been around for a long, long time, and it's proven itself over and over and over again.
Yeah, that's that sense of integrity that we touched on a few minutes ago, the idea that maybe this universe really is part of one thing and not the chaos that many would have us believe in. I love physics and empirical science, even though I also love philosophy and allegory and metaphor and symbol and such. And one of the most, I'll say, depressing laws of physics that I ever encountered is this concept of entropy, where things move from organized to chaos.
As Paul Simon said, everything put together sooner or later falls apart.
Yeah. I mean, what kind of philosophy is that? I had I think it was a calculus or a statistics professor in college explain it this way. He said, imagine a dresser drawer, and you put 50 black marbles on one side of the dresser drawer and 50 white marbles on the other side of that drawer, and then open and close the drawer about 25 times, and you'll see how nicely mixed the black and white marbles have become, moving naturally, right? This is the argument, that nature wants to move from organized to chaos. Well, in terms of energy, that means everything's running out of steam, and everything's winding down and petering out. But what we know about the universe now, it doesn't seem to be true. The universe is expanding in all directions. There's very little redshift in this universe. It's all blue shift because everything is moving away from everything else. That's really challenging to your brain to consider. Further, there is more energy in the universe than ever before. There are gadillions, that's an accurate term, no, billions and billions of tons of hydrogen added to the universe, the most basic element, one electron, one proton, one neutron, that's our buddy hydrogen, just pouring into the universe. We have no idea where it's coming from, how it seems to be, although generally we think of all energy and all matter as coming from the stars. So certainly the fusion process of stars has a lot to do with the generation of hydrogen. So what's the deal? Is everything running down and petering out and going from organized to chaos?
Yes.
And that's wisdom right there, going from the or to the and. And is there other principles of consciousness, perhaps, of wisdom itself, that brings order out of chaos, that acts in a complementary sense, and that's at work in the universe at the same time? And now we see it as part of a great yin and yang, an in-breath and an out-breath, a universe that's in full-blown creation perpetually. At the same time, it's sort of running down and winding out, and there you go, round and round. So there's a certain stability in that.
Yeah, I mean, Dylan said he's not busy being born, he's busy dying. There's always that. But at the same time, we're all busy being born at every moment of our lives. New cells are being born, new brain cells are being created. We're all in the process of busy being born and busy dying simultaneously. And I think there's great wisdom in understanding that. In fact, I think the great enemy of wisdom might be the fear of death. That people who are afraid of death and exploring death and live life without that understanding in mind, they ignore the wisdom that life can bring that comes from understanding the whole cycle of birth and death.
Yeah, you're right. There are schools of psychology that says this is the greatest fear of all, the fear of death, the great unknown, which is tragic because anybody who practices some form of introspection, whether it's the kind of guided imagery that we put into all of our programs in a variety of different ways, a visualization exercise or simple contemplation, just reflecting on how you feel in a given day, in a given moment, or simply watching your breath, my goodness, establishing a fixed point in the bottom of your nose where you just watch your breath. Very soon, people begin to, and there is a consensus on this that's thousands and thousands of years old. Very soon, people who do this, meditation, these prayer-like, introspective, contemplative states, have an awareness of themselves as much more than their body. We become aware of our continuity. We begin to have lucid dreams where we're awake in our dreams, and during the waking state can shift back into the dream, and it's like switching channels. And you understand by changing your attitudes and manipulating belief systems that you can make miracles happen, or not, that we're really in the driver's seat here, though society conditions us to believe we're passengers, either in the back seat or, in most cases, locked in the trunk. We're not passengers unless we're allowing ourselves to be. We can put ourselves in the driver's seat and be the consciousness that determines which thoughts we empower. That's wisdom. That determines what we do with the feelings we have, beyond simply blaming other people or circumstances for those feelings. And, of course, to take responsibility for our behavior and our health. This is all very empowering, and I think it's coming on fast. This emerging left in America, I don't see as political or left at all, really. I just see it, this tide that brought Barack Obama into office, as what one book about 10 years ago called cultural creatives. And I did a program on this a few weeks ago in the Mystery School webinar. Cultural creatives are people that seek wisdom. They really believe in wisdom. They really believe there's organization and integrity here and that we can get a taste of it, if not master it. We don't have to limit ourselves to having absolute mastery of life to access wisdom. Again, we see children accessing wisdom. It's just, are you willing to have an attitude that says, this is a universe that makes sense? There's reliability here. There are laws or rules, laws of physics, laws of metaphysics, laws of mind, and laws of heart that are part of this greater body of wisdom that is transcultural. It's really multicultural. Wisdom is found in all cultures and all societies.
So how do we attain wisdom? It doesn't just come from experience, although that's certainly something. If you sit and do nothing all the time, you won't get very much wisdom. But what we do to attain wisdom is to set up our lives so that it's possible. And that means, number one, get out of stress. Number one, get out of the ego mind, get out of the multitasking place, get out of beta, the brainwave state, and spend more time reflection, spend more time in introspection, spend more time listening to others, reading things, spend more time out of the worry, nervous, anxious place. That's the first thing you can do. And the second thing we can do, I think, to create the environment for wisdom to grow is to take personal responsibility for our lives, is to realize that even if we aren't responsible for all the stimulus, we are responsible for the perception that we have on the stimulus and the response that we choose to take with the stimulus. So I was telling you earlier a great line I read, Sam Levinson, the old comedian. He said, well, it's easy to be wise. All you have to do is think of something real stupid to say and then choose to not say it. That's taking responsibility. I edit a lot of the things that go through my mind because I know if I said them, I would offend people or I would make people nervous. So being responsible for what you say, for the image, the way you dress, the way you take care of it, the way you present yourself in the world, there's a lot of wisdom that comes in understanding other people and understanding how you interact with other people. What Lao Tzu said, one who knows others is wise. Of course, then he went on to say, one who knows oneself is enlightened.
I think another aspect of wisdom we need to discuss is how often it can be used to resolve paradox, or maybe said better, looking at and contemplating paradox can generate wisdom. Again, we tend to, especially when stressed, when overstimulated, see things in a binary way as all this or all that. Everything or nothing, true or false, no in-betweens, no third way, no variations, permutations, or combinations. This is one of the appeals of reactionary thinking, political or otherwise. Just everything is reduced to, are you with us or against us? There's no nuance. Well, there's often no solution to your problem because reality, in the wisdom traditions, truth, I go beyond reality. Truth in the wisdom traditions is never found in the extremes of things. The 100-0 on this side or the 0-100 on that side doesn't exist. There's no point in the swing of the pendulum where it's unaffected by both forces, the tendency to swing away and the tendency to lose that momentum and be pulled back in the opposite direction. Just like on a bar magnet, there's no place between the North Pole and the South Pole where you can escape the influence of one side or another. The truth is in the middle. Doesn't have to be the 50-yard line, but wisdom says, even where there's paradox, in fact, especially where there's paradox, you're going to find wisdom. Either use the wisdom to resolve it or just contemplate the paradox to find the wisdom. Let's give you a couple of examples. I think one big paradox in people's lives is the idea that on one hand, I'm supposed to discover and develop myself. I'm supposed to aspire to be a better person. The religious version of this is stop being a sinner and find a way to get to heaven. The Christian has his way and other religions have their way. To get to some sort of place of reward for being a good person, and to escape either eternal hell and damnation or the suffering of continual rebirth for those who believe in reincarnation. But there's another body of information that's just as big, just as well established, just as credible, that says your potential is already within you. You've already got everything you need. You're really not going anyplace. So which is it? Well, a wise person would say both. As you indicated earlier, Steve, so many of our either-ors can be easily resolved with an and. It's not a 50-50 and. It could be, 10-90 or 40-60. But to look for and find answers in the middle, variations and permutations and combinations. Think of a football field. The end zones are nice for scoring points, but the game is played on the field. These extremes out here are out of bounds.
And you don't have to reinvent the playing field every time you want wisdom either. There's wisdom out there that you can get a hold of. That is, there have been some great ideas that human beings have had and passed down through, at first, an oral tradition, and then later, after Gutenberg started to print up some stuff, it was written. And so one of the great things about wisdom is that you don't have to learn from your own mistakes. You can learn from other people's mistakes. And the greatest way to do that, I think, is to read. If you take a look at all the wisest people who have ever lived, one thing they have in common is they looked to other wise people. They stood on the shoulders of giants. They tapped into the wisdom of the people that came before them. So you don't have to do wisdom all by yourself. You have to have the wisdom to know what other wise people have said is wise for you too.
Wasn't it in The Godfather that they said, like the whole family slogan was, keep your friends close and your enemies closer? There's some wisdom in that. To study your enemy, to know your enemy. Again, the Western simple mindset is kill anything that's different. Because if it's different, it might oppose you, right? So anything that's different is a threat to somebody who bifurcates and has this binary thinking. While a wiser woman or man would say, wait a minute, those differences, those variations actually enrich me. And I'd like to use these variations, these colors of the rainbow, these textures and flavors and the diversity of life to enrich my experience of life. I mean, sometimes I think about these reactionaries. Do they really want the world to be a place where everybody thinks exactly like they do, dresses the same way, has the same beliefs, root for the same teams? I think that would be a very boring, horrible existence. And yet some people are so defensive and offensive. They're so, either-orish in their thinking that they don't consider how diversity and variety and what they think opposes them could actually enrich them.
And people who speak with the language of fear, who speak with either or, us and them, bad guys, good guys, are not the people you look to for wisdom. They may have information for you. They may be intelligent. Some of them are very intelligent indeed. But I think there's always a way to discern people who are wiser, and that is that they can see all different sides. Wisdom always includes the ability to see the other person's point of view. If you can't do that, then you're not being wise. If you can only see your point of view, that's closed-minded, and I think that's just sort of anti-wise. To me, open-minded, willingness to explore all possibilities, there's wisdom in that, because if you can't admit that you just might be wrong, especially about an opinion and not a fact, then there's no wisdom in that. One of the most important keys to wisdom is to know when you have the ability to do something and when you don't have the ability to do something, and to decide to do something when you can and to not do something when you can't. I think people have been living that philosophy for, all the addicted people I know live that basic philosophy of their lives. Do something when you can, don't do something. That's wisdom, to know the difference between those two things. It's wisdom to know when you can make a difference, and it's wisdom to know when you can't make a difference. That's an important concept. It's also important to understand that my greatest wisdom will always come from not my instant knee-jerk reactions, but from my contemplation, from my reflection. As Confucius said, the greatest form, the noblest form of wisdom comes from personal reflection. And then I get wisdom from imitation, from reading and not having to make the mistakes other people made. And I also get it from the hard bumps of my life's experience. I make mistakes and I learn hopefully from those mistakes. So I'm looking to attain wisdom both through introspection, through understanding how other people have gained wisdom, and also through learning my own life's lessons.
Wisdom lessons are rarely taught in school, and when they are taught, it's almost inadvertently. You never got a lesson in how to be wise. And I think part of that is because the emotions are overlooked. Again, I don't want to overgeneralize, but in most situations, we're not taught to use our emotional intelligence in the way we're taught to use our mental intelligence. The whole emphasis is on the latter in school. It's what do you think, and be reasonable. And, well, what is the value of emotional wisdom? Well, one thing is managing your emotions and understanding why you feel the way you feel, how it reveals you, what's really going on, what makes you tick. As you know, I did a radio program for a lot of years in Los Angeles that appeared to be about current events. That was always the hook. It's a public affairs radio program, and we're going to talk about the news and politics and information that's in the public interest. And the technical term, I think, was in the public interest, convenience, and necessity. That was the mandate that we were given by the government for these types of radio talk shows. So people would call up and they'd want to talk about this item in the news or that item in the news, and I'd usually create a little bit of pushback, even if I was just playing devil's advocate. But then, very quickly, I would go to, okay, I hear what you believe, but now tell me why. And they'd struggle with it. And if I could get them feeling a little off balance and maybe lean on them a little bit, right? The clock is ticking, so sometimes you have to be a little abrupt with people. You could feel, as well as hear, them getting more defensive in their position and digging in their heels, and the angst and the emotion in their voice would start to increase. And I would say, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I'm really interested in why you feel so strongly about it. And sometimes they get really worked up and say, I don't feel strongly about this. I'm not angry about this. And I was, well, you sure sound angry about it. That's wisdom, is to understand yourself not only intellectually, but to be that higher self that you find in paradise that can choose the better thoughts. Just because you think something doesn't mean you need to believe it. You get to decide which thoughts you're going to empower and pursue. And that ought to be obvious since we have so many conflicting thoughts, but people just think they are confused. You are the higher self that you find in paradise. That's the alpha brainwave meditation, the reflection we're talking about, that can decide what to do with those thoughts, which ones to agree with, to disagree with, to put on the back burner and check out later, to make conditional for a while. But also the EQ, the emotional intelligence. You be that higher self to discern why you feel the way you feel and what's really going on. And do you have a hidden agenda? Is there a secondary gain here that's motivating you that's just beyond your awareness? A wise person could expand their awareness and realize why they feel so strongly about it on a deeper level, and then maybe even a deeper level still. I think that's definitely part and parcel of what we mean by wisdom.
Yeah, certainly you use the term deeper understanding, I think, is a good concept when you associate it with wisdom. Perhaps the most famous wisdom story, I think, that people know is the story of Solomon and the baby, the wise story of Solomon from the Old Testament, where these two women who lived near each other or in the same place as each other had these babies at the same time. And shortly thereafter, one of them died, and the other one grabbed the first one's baby while it was asleep and said it was her baby. And so they went to the king, and one woman says, that's my baby, she kidnapped. Hers died and she kidnapped it. And the other one said, no, this is my baby, she's making that story up. And so Solomon, using both IQ and EQ said, well, I know what we'll do. We'll just cut the baby in half. And one of the women said, no, don't. Let her have it. Let her have it. And Solomon knew, of course, that was the real mother, because the mother said, I'd much rather my baby be alive, not in my possession, than kill my baby. So it's like, there's an interesting parable that goes along with the idea of trusting not only the thinking process, but the feeling process. The heart speaks with great wisdom, too.
So let's go to that paradise. That's the name of the series, right? Finding yourself, this higher, wiser self in paradise, in this quiet place where the emotional nature is calm and all those ideas, those voices and pictures competing for your attention begins to quiet down. And in that tranquility, that undisturbed state, wisdom remains. It's when you let everything that's spurious fall away, what remains is core truth. And it works. And if you practice and practice and practice, you create a reliability on this. Women and men who do this end up being wise women and men. There's just no question about it. It really begins with honoring that to know thyself is far more important, far more significant than knowing anything about other people. That to judge others as a way of knowing yourself is irrelevant. They're not you. But to know yourself, free from judgment, to really look deeply and empathize and realize what makes you tick, does give you a capacity to empathize with other people. And you don't have to judge them then. You can empathize. You can understand why this person over here is behaving in such a stupid way, because not long ago you were reflecting on when you did the same kind of thing. And you caught yourself, and you saw how easy it was. I mean, consider the guy that cuts you off in traffic next time, and you get so upset and so worked up that they would do that to you. Consider that you've done the same thing to many people without realizing it. You didn't know you cut them off or upset them. You couldn't understand why they reacted the way they did. Well, maybe the guy that just cut you off in the same way didn't realize what he was doing. The power of empathy, when you know yourself and put that ahead of knowing other things, you can empathize, and the quality of understanding then is far superior to the semblance of understanding that comes when you use only the mind to try to judge. He's good, she's bad, that's right, this is wrong, not for me, maybe for you. How about just letting your awareness move down into your body, somewhere in the area of the heart or the tummy, and feel how those feelings feel? Let's do it. Close your eyes, take a nice, slow, deep breath. Hold as you peak, and then as you exhale, just as slowly begin to create and sense a feeling of letting go.
And your muscles relax, anxiety release, confusion abates. You feel inner peace. Let go of all fear. Get clear. Love, peace of mind, wisdom begins here. With every breath you release, feel more of that peace, and find how wisdom can come through. There's nothing that you have to do. Just be you in peace, and wisdom will come through. In reflection, introspection, in recalling the things you've read and learned, in choosing to learn from your experiences, knowledge that you've earned. You become wise by choosing to explore wisdom, seeing it as a thing you can create. Through introspection, reading and reflection, and learning your lessons until you're great. Through that, your wisdom you can create.
I'd like you to imagine yourself as if you were a mountain stream, and the water is running down through the center of you, but there's big trees and brush and rocks, some of them big boulders that have tumbled into the stream bed, and so the flow of water through you as the stream is rather turbulent as it splashes up against this rock and attempts to spill over the top of this fallen tree. I'd like you to, in your mind, simply clear all that debris away. Imagine that you're a fast-running mountain stream with this beautiful gravel bed and no debris at all. And you feel a sense of flow through you with less resistance and less resistance. And as if by letting go, becoming even more relaxed and feeling even safer. Feeling as if somehow you're going deeper and deeper into safety and relaxation. You find that you're more open to that flow. You've created for yourself a path of least resistance. There's less turmoil, less disturbance, less resistance, less blockage. You do that when you refuse to be afraid. When you stop worrying over and over and over. Do the due diligence that's necessary in your life, but that repeatedly going over the same worries and concerns and then looking for more things to worry about as if that's going to help you feel safe, that's like piling more debris in the stream as if that will enhance the flow. Quite the contrary is true. Open up. Imagine no debris, no resistance, as you become an ever more efficient path of least resistance for the flow of wisdom through you, into, through, and out, an enhanced flow of good ideas, of revelation and inspiration and realization, illumination. Those aha experiences are enhanced as you let go, as you allow and permit yourself to be wise.
And in your mind, you hear these words. I realize in this state that I create when I close my eyes, I realize what's really wise. In this state that I create, as I close my eyes, I realize what's really wise. I realize what's really wise. Let that percolate within. I realize what's really wise, and let the process begin. I realize what's really wise. When I create this state, I close my eyes. I realize what's really wise. What's right for me to do. The things I need to put myself through. The resistance I can release. The way to inner peace. I realize what's really wise in this state that I create as I close my eyes, this place of paradise, I realize what's really wise.
Wisdom is a path from alienation to unification. It is love. It is awareness. It is mindfulness. Wisdom is harmony and happiness and peace. For there is no way to these things. Wisdom is not a destination. It is a means to an end. It is that harmony, as I said, that leads from diversity and alienation to unity and unification. Wisdom is the way. Wisdom is the adventure. Wisdom is the path you walk. Wisdom is more than mental intelligence, more than emotional intelligence. It's the higher self found in paradise that is able to detach mindfully and see the bigger picture from an elevated perspective, broader horizons. And as we keep insisting, the connections and the harmony where most people see only discord and separation and hostility. Wisdom is found in the mind and the heart, but it is a higher heart standing above mental and emotional intelligence. And it's available here automatically. Do nothing but let that which is nonsense fall away. Let that which is made up and invented release all of what does not work for you and never has, and see what remains. When you drop the games, the roles, the characters, and the masks, the attempts to please other people, see what remains when you let go of everything that is not wise. And you will have found wisdom in paradise.
For fear is dark and cloudy, and love is bright and clear. Fear is somewhere out there, and love's always in here. When you're wise, you realize wisdom will appear. Fear is always cloudy. Love's transparent and clear. Fear's out there somewhere, and love's always in here. And when you feel wise, wisdom appears. So allow wisdom to come through reflection, introspection, and prayer. Allow wisdom to come from reading what people out there have to say, and let wisdom come from learning from what you've done wrong and learn from your own mistakes. Lots of ways that wisdom takes, but it always starts with releasing fear, because fear is cloudy and love is clear.
Bring this peace of mind, this wisdom with you, effortlessly, as you reorient yourself to our voices and your recollection of the room around you, and prepare in a moment to open your eyes, wide awake and alert. And knowing that there's nothing about wisdom that you need to carry with you or bring with you, that it's everywhere equally present, that you are the one that perceives wisdom from the higher self we find in paradise. And so All you need to do is leave behind all that is unwise. And take a nice, slow, deep breath. Hold as you peak, sense the fullness, and now, as you exhale, feel the letting go, and open your eyes wide awake, alert, back in the room, refreshed and rested and re-energized.
That's one of the cool things about wisdom is you know it when you hear it, you know it when you see it, you recognize it. Maybe you couldn't have thought of it, but when you saw somebody else exhibit it, you go, wow, that's pretty wise. One of the wisest things I think that you can do is to turn on your friends to these shows like this one about wisdom, and all you have to do is go back to the focusedpassion.com website and log in with your email address and your password, and if you forget what it is, just hit tell me my password and we'll fix it for you. And then you can send one to a friend. Any of these programs that you have on your playlist, you can send to anybody you want to. You can send as many as you want to as many people as you want. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in sharing knowledge that you find that you learn from.
I'm a big believer in networking, and Steve and I are not only into the self-promotion business, but believing that of all the inspirational speakers and inspirational authors and others, trainers, whomever, psychologists, writers, therapists, wherever you find wisdom, pass that on. Everybody's forwarding attachments in their email and putting links on Twitter and Facebook, and you can do the same thing. In fact, I think of it less as an opportunity than a responsibility. It's something that I do because I'm in radio. It's something I would do if I were not in radio or did not have these podcasts. It's really just like reading a book that you loved or seeing a movie you thought was great. You got to tell people about it. Happiness is born a twin, as Byron the poet once said. So you got to share that. Share all of this stuff. Anytime you find inspiration along these lines that feels wise and true, and trust those feelings, right? Even if your head gets a little confused. If you encounter some source of information that doesn't feel quite right, trust those feelings. But if it feels like this is good stuff, and I have friends that are going to benefit from this, then promote it, whoever it is. Pay it forward. Visit more human potential and personal development sites and personal empowerment sites. But we surely appreciate you sharing news about what we're doing here and at The Ageless Wisdom. We have the Sunday webinar at theagelesswisdom.com. The THE is part of the address. It's the W's, theagelesswisdom.com. And you can get everything you need there and at focusedpassion.com. Focused Passion is where you send your friends to sign up for the 6 free sample programs that we do here in this Finding Yourself in Paradise series. And they can always upgrade to their collection anytime they'd like for just 99 cents a week, just as you did.
I just did a tweet on my Stephen L. Snyder Twitter account the other day. It goes like this. If you're looking for wisdom, here's a simple trick. Make your negative thoughts slippery and let your positive thoughts stick. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that.
I do too. As always, be gentle, love life, and take care of each other. For Steve Snyder, this is Michael Benner. Aloha from Maui.